I yearn for a world in which God's shalom reigns. A world of peace. A world where people find healing and love, and where every person has enough to thrive. A world in which the divide between rich and poor is less and less and less. I remember in college when I was going to Florida Atlantic University, getting my bachelor's degree in public administration, I remember my professor and I had a discussion about the rich and the poor. And he told me, he said, "Stacey, if there's no poor people in the world, who would collect the garbage?" And so I said to him, "That's a bunch of garbage, Professor." I said, "What do you mean?" I said, "If people have enough, you don't think they would want to pick up the garbage? If you don't think people could know that their lights were turned on and they had enough food in their refrigerator and they know their kids were being cared for, you don't think they would want to be moved to be a nurse, be a hotel cleaner, be a garbage collector?" I said, "That's ridiculous, Professor." I said, "I just don't get it." And so he told me I was an idealist. And I said, "What's an idealist?" And he says, "You think everything should be even." I said, "It should." And so we had this discussion, and he said, "Let's just agree to disagree." And so we did. But it was still ridiculous. And I crave a world where all people, all of us, in response to God's amazing gifts, we build a community where we live generously with one another, where we offer from our own abundance so that others just may simply live. In Paul's message to us in 2 Corinthians, he addresses this. And he's bringing the example of the Macedonia church in as an example to the Corinth church. So just keep that in mind as I'm reading Paul's words this morning. And I'm reading out of the Message Bible. "This was totally spontaneous," Paul says, and it was the Macedonians' own idea, and it caught us completely off guard. What explains it was that they had first given themselves without question to God and to us. The other giving simply flowed out of the purpose of God working in their lives. That's what prompted us to ask Titus to bring the relief offering to the Corinthians' attention, so that what was so well begun could be finished up. "You do so well in so many things," Paul said to the Corinthians. "You trust God. You articulate the word. You're insightful. You're passionate. You love us. Now, Church of Corinth, do your best to finish this." Paul says, "I'm not trying to order you around and order you against your will." He said, "But by bringing the Macedonians' enthusiasm as a stimulus to your love, I'm hoping it'll bring the best out of you. You are familiar with the generosity of our Master Jesus Christ. Rich as he was, he gave it all away for us. In one stroke, Jesus became poor so that we may become rich." So Paul goes on and says, "Here's what I think. The best thing you can do right now is to finish what you started last year and not let those good intentions grow stale. Your heart's been in the right place for all along. You've got what it takes to finish it up, so go to it. Once this prior commitment is clear, you do what you can, not what you can't, because the heart regulates our hands. This isn't so others can take it easy while you sweat it out. No, this is so you can work shoulder to shoulder with other people so that your surplus matches their deficit, and so their surplus matches your deficit. In the end, it evens out. Prophecy is fulfilled. Nothing left over to the one with the most, and nothing left lacking to the one with the least. Amen. Hallelujah. Paul uses this as an example of the Macedonian church because they were an impoverished church. And yet they displayed a wealth of generosity beyond anything Paul had ever seen. And so this means that they didn't have to ask twice to follow through on what they said they were going to do. They just did it. And so on the other end of the spectrum, we have the Corinth church, who would be a church today that we would think of would be well off. The church had a lot of money. The church had a big praise band. The church had a bunch of staff. The church was different than the Macedonian church. But this church, they were stuck. Because they had the question, well, what should we give and when should we give it? And Paul says, just do it. Finish what you started. Finish the good intentions you have. Carry through. Because the Macedonian church gets it. They are poor and yet they give generously. So come on, wealthy church. Give generously. Figure it out, Paul's saying. Follow through on what you've said you were going to do. Stop asking questions. Just do it. Be like Nike. Just do it. Paul challenged this church at Corinth to recognize their abundance. That they might share and that they might give generously to those in need, just like the Macedonian church had done. And I call this Paul's theology of a generous undertaking. Because in the end, Paul tells us it illustrates what Christ has done for us, right? We know it. Christ has given it all. You can't give more than your blood. You can't give more than your life. And so Paul's saying this is the economic model that the church lives by. We give it all. We don't hold back. We give all that we have. The Gentile churches were struggling at these wealthy churches at just giving something little because they worried that they were going to compromise their own lifestyles. They were worried they weren't going to be able to go to the lake every weekend. They were worried that Disney World might close before they got there again. A pastor friend of mine had on Facebook, she has 4 kids. They spend a lot of time at Disney, right? So she got a babysitter for her 4 kids, and guess where her husband and her went? Disney. I might stop going to Disney. It's making me sick. Go somewhere else. Everybody spends so much money in Disneyland. I cry when I have to go to Disney World because they take your last dime. And they want you to sit and smile about it. It's the happiest place on earth. Come on in, because I'm going to take your last penny. And you're going to laugh when you don't it. That's just my rabbit trail for today. Paul reminds us that we give everything because God provides everything for us. Remember how God distributed the manna when there was no food? No one goes without God's providence. What about the widow and her mite? Her last nickel, her last dime. No one goes without God's generosity. And Amy, do you mind if I bring you as an example?
Go right ahead.
When I first started worshiping with Amy struggles like all of us struggle. And I was collecting the offering from the choir. And I saw her envelope, and her name was on it, and she had given $28. And I knew at that moment, and that time, that was the last dollar that she had. And I cried taking that offering. Because of Amy's faith, I was blessed. Out of the widow's mite, God had an opportunity to bless her beyond belief. And then I look out into the congregation and I know that people have the financial means and the financial wherewithal to give all that they can, and they don't. And I cry because they're missing God's blessing. Malachi 3:10 tells us this. Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. And this is the one scripture that God says, test me in this. God says, test me. You don't believe me? Test me in it, God says. And see if I don't throw open the floodgates. And I bless you beyond ways you can't even imagine, because when you trust me, my word is not void. God says, if you got $10 in your pocket, give it to me and let me show you what I can do with it. God says, you got an extra day, a week that you're not working, give it to me and let me show you what I can do with your time. God says, if you have time to pray, pray to God and let me show how I answer prayers. God says, give me your witness. Give my people your witness. Tell them what I am doing in your lives, and I will bless people beyond your imagination. Hallelujah. Praise be to God.
Amen.
Through Christ's offering of himself, can't God's people give a fair portion of what God has blessed them with? And I'm not just talking about money. I'm talking about our prayers, our presence, our witness, our fellowship, our love, our connection. Maybe if we gave out of our abundance, there would be equality, so people wouldn't have to fight for food, shelter, clothing, dental care, medical care. I mean, maybe, just maybe, shalom would reign. This is God's economy. This is kingdom economy. You see, God's people, we don't vote with our wallets. God's people vote with our hearts. Because that's where God is. If God is in your wallet, you've got a problem. Because that means you serve the other master. And that's a problem. We vote because our vote is casted with the kingdom of God. We live out these kingdom economics where we do one thing. We serve one God for one reason, and that is for the salvation of all people. That is our economy. That is what we live for. That is what Jesus died for. Jesus didn't die so we could put an extra building on a building. Jesus says that if any of, this is really important. When we as believers of the community, I always tell you guys, look out the doors, reach out, go out. But this is a message for all of us inside these walls. Jesus tells us if you have a believer who is suffering, who doesn't have, and the rest of the church doesn't equalize that, the whole church is wounded. There is a special care for those that are in our circle of family. There is a special care for all of us that worship in this church together. And when we live out of our abundance and others are not even able to make their basics, and we worship together, our church is wounded. We are not living out kingdom economics. What makes our gifts, whether it's prayers, presents, gifts, all those good things, acceptable to God is simply our willingness to give it. Our willingness to give our last $28, maybe. Our willingness to give the hour that we have gotten free for the week we're going to go and serve. And we give with this grateful, thankful attitude because Christ has done it for us already. We don't give so we can have a room or a chair or a pew or a building named after us. Even though that's nice. If you want to do it, that's fine. That's not how you give. We give simply because God has given it all for us. Christ measures our giving by our heart attitude. Now this kind of giving, and this is not a dig, or it's not trying to make people who have money and who are wealthy and who have abundance guilty or angry or mad. What Paul is telling us today is that the kind of giving that we elicit is not the kind of giving that burdens us to where we can't take care of what God has given us. God doesn't want to burden you. But God says, when I give you more than you need, when I give you more than you need, when I give you more than you need, I want you to share it. Because I trust in your faith that you're going to do the right thing with it. I trust in your faith that you're going to change someone else's life and you're going to save their soul by what I have given so you may give. Remember Abraham? God said, Abraham, I'm going to bless you so that you may be a blessing. Church of Hawthorne, God has blessed you so that you may be a blessing.
Amen.
Please don't forget that. I want to read to you something that John Wesley wrote in his sermon about clothes. How would you like it if I came to your house and told you what to wear? Here you go. John Wesley said in his sermon on dress in 1786, "Nothing can be more evident than this. For the money you lay out on your own apparel, the less you have left to clothe the naked, to feed the hungry, to lodge the strangers, to relieve those that are sick and in prison, and to lessen the numberless afflictions to which we are exposed to in this vale of tears. When you are laying out that money in costly apparel, which you could have otherwise spared for the poor, you thereby deprive them of what God, the proprietor of all, had lodged in your hands for their use. If so, what you put on yourself, you are, in effect, tearing from the back of the naked. As the costly and delicate food which you eat, you are snatching from the mouth of the hungry." John Wesley went on to say, "Let me see before I die a Methodist congregation full as plainly dressed as a Quaker congregation." The word of Wesley, John Wesley, the founder of our Methodist movement. He was a stickler for some things. Apparently, dress and jewelry was one of them. He'd probably kick me out of the pulpit this morning. Good thing he's not here. As a United Methodist, we join the church. When we join the church, we take vows, don't we? We promise to do something. We vow to support the church with our prayers, presence, gifts, witness, and service. So I ask you, are you praying for your church generously? Are you praying for one another? Are you praying for the church universal, all the way around the world, because you said you would? Are you present in all areas of the life of the church? Are you in a small group? Are you in fellowship? Is your presence known? Do people know when you're not here? Are you in Sunday school? Are you doing works of mercy and works of piety? Do you take your vows seriously? I can tell you that, Hank and I have been looking at vows really seriously lately because we're getting ready to take the big plunge here in November. And so if I say, hey, yeah, I want to marry you, and then I don't see him for a month, it might be a problem. Or you might like it, I don't know, it might work out to that. But when we take a vow to be part of the church, and we don't see your presence, and you're not growing in your faith, and this is just another thing to check off, why bother joining? You're missing the blessing that God has for you.
Amen.
Do you attend the second Sunday dinner? We just don't put something on the calendar to do it. We want to see our family. We want to break bread with you. We want to know how you're doing. We want to know what you're struggling with and how we can help you. If you can't bring food, who cares? Come there's always plenty. If you miss second Sunday dinner because you go out to lunch with your family, go the next week with your family.
Amen.
Come spend some family time with us. We don't fight hard, darling. You guys ever seen Austin Powers? Yeah. I don't bite hard, darling. We don't fight. We love. God has called us, His people, to take on this generous undertaking that Christ gave us the example to do. And so how do we do this? Because it's really almost the impossible dream, isn't it? Isn't it really impossible to give out of my abundance so that someone else may have? Because I'm afraid maybe they don't work hard enough, or I'm afraid maybe they don't deserve it, or I'm afraid that, my bias and my pet peeves are going to roll into it. And God says, give. God says, give and let me work it out. Sometimes God will use our money to bring that person down, to be exposed. So they will be known. Without our prayers. And without us going to Christ and saying, Christ, help me remember everything that you have done for me so I can go and do the same with the world. Because I guarantee you, Christ laid His life down for those people that said, crucify Him, crucify Him, crucify Him, as much as His mother at the foot of the cross. How do I have that? How do I have that presence of the Holy Spirit and the generosity of Christ in my life so I can give without strings? And Christ says you can't. So every morning I wake up and I say, Christ, give me your heart. God, give me your humility. God, do not let me be a ship without a rudder. Just going in circles. God has equipped each one of us with grace and love and mercy so that we can take on this generosity that is beyond anything the world has ever seen, and the world needs it more than ever in my lifetime, right now, today. We don't have to wait. We don't have to wait. And it's not just about money. It's about your time. It's about your presence. It's about you sharing what God has done in your life. So the question for us today is, do we really believe it? Do we really believe that when we give out of our scarcity, when we give beyond what we are comfortable giving, will God really bless us? And I'll say to you, the only way you're going to know is if you test God in this. In fact, I would say, if you promise me you'll test God in this, and you give more in whatever ways you want to give, time, presence, witness, whatever, and you are not blessed, or your family is not blessed, then I'll give it back to you. Because I know.
Amen.
I know without a doubt that God will bless you in ways you can't even imagine.
Can't help you.
That's the God you serve.
Yep.
Take the lead. Amen?
Amen.
Amen. We come this morning to the table.